Hello, and thank you for being with us today. I'm Larry Wessels, Director of Christian Answers, and we're getting ready to do a subject here on this program on the religion of Islam, and joining me to analyze this subject is our Director of Research, Steve Morrison. Steve, great to have you here, brother.
Well, thank you, Larry. Glad to be here.
Steve has done a lot of great research on this subject, and others, of course, but currently we're doing a series called the Sects, or Groups of Islam. The different factions, from a Christian terminology, the different denominations, you might say, of these Islamic groups that are out there that have different belief systems and so forth. And we've been looking at all of those beliefs and analyzing them. And today's group that we'll be looking at is the sect known as the Shi'ite Muslims. Now, that's one of the biggest ones, Steve. You've got the Sunni Muslims, I guess, would be the biggest sect.
They're the biggest, yeah.
But here you have the Shi'ite Muslims, would be probably the second biggest. And with that, why don't you just go ahead and lead us into an introduction of this, and we'll start looking at the religion of the Shi'ite Muslims.
All right. Well, in the previous show, we did the Sunni Muslims, and we talked about Muslim history from maybe more of a Sunni perspective or slant. And now we're going to talk about from a Shiite slant. And I just want to say up front that the point is not to say that the Shiites are more right than the Sunnis, or the Sunnis are more right than the Shiites, but the point is to provide information. I mean, personally, we believe that both are wrong, and both need to come to Jesus. And to use a Shiite term, both are waqifa, or hesitators, as far as the death of Jesus on the cross. Before we start, though, I wanted to read a verse in the Bible that I think is very applicable about Christians during this time and this culture. And it says, Jesus is speaking here, and he says, in fact, this is John 16:2-3. They will put you out of the synagogue. In fact, a time is coming when anyone who kills you will think he is offering a service to God. They will do such things because they have not known the Father or me. Well, Muslims don't accept God as a father, so this certainly, Muslims is one group that this refers to, perhaps not the only group, though. But one thing, as many Americans, I have the idea, don't understand anything about Shiites, and almost nothing. And we'll have a little quiz just to kind of see how you do. Is that many times battle cries and slogans really kind of maybe define a viewpoint, or certainly give a lot of meaning to a viewpoint. And we'll ask the viewers to see if you know the meaning of these cries. Here's one. Give me liberty or give me death. Well, of course, it'd be hard to understand Americans, or even the American Revolution, without understanding what that meant. How about this one? Remember the Alamo. Okay. Well, it'd be hard to understand the history of Texas without knowing what was said there. How about this? Karbala is everywhere. Every month is Muharram. Every day is Ashura. And this, what in the world does that mean? It probably has something to do with Shiites, right? But most Americans would just be clueless. This was a key slogan in Iran under Khomeini. This is according to Shiite Islam, From Religion to Revolution, page 136. So before we get through today, we want to at least understand what that means. And when the Shiites, chanted that, what did they mean by that? Okay, so before we understand about Shiite Islam, we have to know a little bit about the history. Okay, after Muhammad died, there was a big question of who was going to be the next leader of the faithful, who was going to be the next caliph. Okay, now Shiites say that the next caliph should have been Ali. Okay, but Sunnis say the next caliphs were the ones who were actually the caliph, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman. And after that, Ali was a caliph. So Sunnis and Shiites both agree that Ali was the rightful caliph at some point in time. They just agree at which point.
This is after the death of Muhammad.
Right.
And who is Ali, for those that don't know?
Ali is the son-in-law of Muhammad, and he was very close to Muhammad. He married Fatima, Muhammad's daughter, but by his first wife, Khadija. And anyway, Ali only became caliph when he was in his mid-50s, about 656 A.D., and among other things, he fought the Quraysh, which is interesting because they were originally for Ali, but when Ali compromised and didn't want to have civil war to become he didn't fight Umar Abu Bakr. The Quraysh said that he was wrong to to compromise. He also defeated a revolt by Muhammad's wife, Aisha. And Aisha was captured, and she was treated well and taken to Mecca. The two generals, though, were killed, and many of the followers were killed. And this is at the Battle of Al-Jamal, which is called the Camel. Okay, and he was only a caliph for a few years when Muawiyah in Damascus, who was related to Uthman, said that he was the rightful caliph. And they fought at the Battle of Siffin, which is in July of 657 AD. And this is only about 25 years after Muhammad died. And even though, according to Shi'ite sources, Muawiyah encouraged defectors by bribes with promises of money, Ali's forces were still winning. So Muawiyah's troops had to do something. So what they did is they tore out pages of the Quran. Usually Muslims don't tear out the Quran today, but they tore out pages and they put them on the ends of their spears. And so if Ali's forces had to fight them, they had to fight through pages of the Quran. And they said, we shouldn't be fighting because we're all Muslim brothers. And so the battle just kind of stopped before Ali had complete victory. And they decided that they need to have some sort of arbitration to determine who should be the rightful caliph. And so there was one arbiter, Amir, who represented Muawiyah, and there was another arbiter representing Ali. And Amir persuaded everyone that both caliphs should be deposed, and that you should have a third caliph for the sake of peace with everybody. So both of them were deposed. Okay, and after they were deposed, then Amir then appointed Muawiyah caliph again. And so for all practical purposes, it looks like Ali was conned out of being caliph. It's sort of like saying, well, we can't agree, so neither of us will be caliph, and then, oh, by the way, we'll change, and now, he's caliph again. Mm-hmm. So the Shiites see this as something that was a wrong done to Ali, and actually many Sunnis tend to feel the same. Okay, and after Muawiyah, he had his son Yazid be the caliph, and after him, you had other caliphs who were the Umayyads, who were fairly corrupt, and then eventually the Abbasids, and you had a lot of corrupt caliphs after that time. Though Muawiyah himself, we don't have evidence that he was particularly corrupt. So
these are the leaders of the Islamic faith after Muhammad,
right?
It's sort of like successors, sort of like the Pope of Islam.
It's actually greater than the Pope. It's a combination of Pope and maybe Supreme Commander. Okay. All right, so the political and religious combined. Okay. Yeah, and so anyway, the Kharijites, they figured out that they were going to assassinate all of them, Muawiyah, Amir, Ali. But they were unsuccessful in assassinating two of them. They only assassinated Ali. And so Ali was killed. He was stabbed, and he died 2 days later. Okay? And some of the things that Ali said, he had views of women that were very, let's just say they weren't enlightened.
Now you're talking about Ali. This is the one that the Shiite Muslims really have respect for.
Right.
They think he should have been the successor immediately to Muhammad.
Right.
And so they don't recognize these other caliphs like the Sunnis do, as you've said. I'm just kind of rehashing a little bit what you said. So now you're going to tell us what Ali has taught and said. Do Shiites today still, that's in history, but do they still, do they worry about this even to this day?
Yes,
about Ali?
Succession, Ali in particular, and succession in general is an important thing, very important thing for the caliphs. A small number of Shiites, yes, a small number of Shiites in a few groups, they actually worship Ali. They believe that Ali is part of visible God.
Oh, so some of the Shiites think so much of this man named Ali that they think he's part of God and they worship him as God. But what about the mainstream Shiites? Do they consider what Ali taught and said to be important?
Yes, and many of them think he had. They don't worship him as God, but they think that he had maybe additional teaching, and that Ali and the people after him, who were called the Imams, they are required in Islam for interpreting the Quran. So if you have the Quran, it's not good enough without a living interpreter of it.
Okay, so is this a major difference with, let's say, the Sunni Muslims?
Yes. Now, Sunnis would tend to say the interpretation of the Quran is required, but the interpretation is done by their tradition, and so
the hadiths. And
so individual leaders in Sunni Islam, individual religious leaders, do not have as high a place as they do in Shiite Islam. Basically, if you to disobey the imam is the same as disobeying God.
Well, how many imams can the Shiites have at one time?
They only have one rightful imam at one time. However, there have been many cases where many people have claimed to be imam. A little bit like in Europe, you'd have multiple popes at the same time. They'd fight, and they say, well, they'd all agree there's only one rightful pope, but they disagree on which one it was.
They fight it out until there's just one guy that's kind of
Right.
standing,
Right.
and then he's in power until what? He dies, and then the next guy comes
Yeah,
in.
and most of the first imams died violently, actually.
Okay, because it's a power position.
Right.
And then there's always another guy down the line that wants that power.
Mm-hmm.
And so they knock off the one that's in power, and then they can take his place and get the
Yeah,
power for
and
themselves.
it's not necessarily the son who would knock off the father. It might be somebody else who would kill him, and the son might be loyal to the father, and then the son would take over.
Okay, so just for the sake of clarity with the viewers at home, you've got this Ali, and he was like an imam to the Shiites.
The first imam.
And what he said back then, in 657 or wherever or earlier, still counts for them today as
Right.
almost like the word of God. Is that what you're saying? Or-
Yeah, and probably even higher for Shiites than the Sunni tradition is than the Hadiths are for Sunnis.
Okay, so a Sunni Muslim doesn't take into account so much what Ali said as a Shiite would.
Sunnis would actually say that Ali had no additional teaching beyond what was generally available.
Okay, so they're not going to pay that much attention to him outside of him just being kind of
Right.
a normal guy that followed Muhammad and he's a Muslim.
Yeah, they respect him, and many of them will even go so far as to say he got a bad deal. Was kind of conned out, and after this time they will generally admit that there was a lot of corruption and stuff among the rulers.
But the Shiites, though, are a horse of a different color on
Right.
this. They're going to be looking at Ali, and they're going to give him a lot of extra special authority for Islamic teaching
Right.
and things of that
But
nature.
not just Ali, though. Ali and his successors.
So as it goes down through time and the centuries, you got one after another, after another, after another, and he's going to be the authoritative interpreter
Right.
of the Quran and Islamic teachings for the Shiite Muslims.
Right. Now, if you talk with any single Shiite group, they will basically think in terms of a line of succession. But if you look at all of the Shiites, you basically have a tree of succession because they split off, and this guy's the rightful one, no, this other guy's the rightful one. So it's like a tree of the rightful one.
What's the difference between an Ayatollah and an Imam?
Okay, I don't know the exact difference, but the Ayatollah, like the Ayatollah Khomeini, was sort of like the supreme religious ruler of Iran.
So would that make him like the Imam?
Not in the
successor?
not in the same sense as the early ones, because most of the Shiites are what are called Twelvers or Ithna Ashariya, and they believe that the last Imam is the 12th one, and he didn't die; he mysteriously disappeared, but he will return someday in the future as the Mahdi or rightly guided one.
Oh,
And so there are still religious leaders after that, but they don't have the same stature as the first 12.
Okay, but you can have someone like an Ayatollah Khomeini that has all the supreme authority to interpret, just like Ali did back
Right.
then, and these other guys. And that's a big difference from like the Sunnis. So Sunnis, I would assume, wouldn't take into account as much what, let's say, someone like Ayatollah Khomeini would say.
Not at all, actually, yeah.
Okay, so they wouldn't give him any credence at all if you're a
Right.
Sunni Muslim.
Right.
They were looking more at the Al-Bukhari Hadiths and the
Sahih
Quran
Muslim
and
and
stuff
all
and,
that,
the
right.
tradition. But to them, the Shiite Ayatollahs and things don't really count
Right.
for much additional teaching when it comes to Islam.
Yeah, not at all. Now, if you think about it, many Shiites are non-Arab. There are Arab Shiites too, but if they're non-Arab and they don't know Arabic, and it's been taught that the Quran can't be fully understood unless you read Arabic, then all these people say it's almost like, it's almost maybe not worth as much reading the Quran in another language as in Arabic, and so we need to go to an individual, and this individual will just tell us what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just tell us what the Quran says, but tell us what we need to do for our time.
Right. So what you're about to read to us is sayings from Ali, which Shiites, even to this day, take very seriously.
These are not only sayings from Ali, but because we actually don't have record of that much he said, but these are sayings about Ali to kind of show his importance.
Okay.
All right. So, for example, in the Bukhari Hadith, it said some Zanakiya, which is a word for atheists, they were brought to Ali, and they're atheists, and Ali burned them, burned them to death. The news of this event reached Ibn Abbas, who said, "If I had been in his place, I would not have burned them. as Allah's apostle forbade it, saying, "Do not punish anybody with Allah's punishment," meaning fire. "I would have killed them according to the statement of Allah's apostle. Whoever changes Islamic religion, then kill him." So Ali has kind of a reputation for being fairly extreme. You know, he doesn't just kill the atheists like many Muslims would do. He burns them to death.
Well, it also, from looking at this hadith from Al-Bukhari that you just mentioned, 957, about Ali and him burning these guys, these atheists, to death, it almost looks like this is a backhanded slap at Ali, because it's saying he didn't follow the right prescription for executing these guys.
Right, and there are a number of other things in the Bukhari Hadith and Sahih Muslim. And remember, these are Sunni Muslim documents,
right?
That say things like Ali didn't have any special teaching. Aisha said she was with Muhammad when he died, and he did not appoint Ali a successor. And the Hadiths, remember, they were all collected after the split with the Sunnis and Shiites. And so, you know, you might say, well, did some anti-Shiite bias slip into these hadiths?
Because you're talking about these hadiths and the Al-Bukhari coming along maybe a couple of hundred years later.
Yep.
Right? And so I would assume then, from even this quote you gave here from the hadith, that most of your Shiites would not buy into the hadiths, because they are kind of negative,
right,
to Ali, who they want to revere very greatly.
Right, and they would say there are some true things in hadiths, but there are many untrue things, and how do you tell what's what? And so
right. Things added in, especially things against Ali, they would look at that as like just pure propaganda against people who don't like Ali.
And so, for example, we have some papers and stuff, and what the Bukhari Hadith say, what Sahih Muslim says, and when you show this to a Shiite Muslim, they kind of say, well, so what? You know, they probably do have a lot of errors. You know.
So the Hadiths are a much bigger thing to Sunnis, but not to the Shiites.
Right. Now the Shiites have their own written traditions, though, and a lot of them came from the sixth Imam, whose name was Jafar. Okay. You remember that from Aladdin. You know, Jafar was an evil person there. Well, there's a different Jafar. But anyway, Jafar is kind of interesting, is that Jafar was not a violent man. He wasn't so political, and he actually would travel to Mecca and Medina. And strangely enough, Sunnis respect Jafar. You know, of course, Shiites respect him more, but he's actually kind of respected by both. And later on, there was a ruler who tried to combine Sunnis and Shiites, kind of called Jafar. He said, well, they kind of have Jafar in common, so can't we just all kind of get together and bury the hatchet? But that was ill-fated and didn't happen.
I see.
Okay. So another thing kind of said about Ali is it says, Ali said, and this is, you know, allegedly by Ali. We don't have proof that Ali actually said this, but it says, Ali said, God is one. He was alone in his singleness, and he spoke one word, and it became a light, and he created from that light Muhammad, and he created me and my descendants, that is, the other imams. And then he spoke another word, and it became a spirit, and he caused it to settle upon that light, and he caused it to settle on our bodies. And so we are the Spirit of God and his word, ... And this was before the creation of the world, and, you know, ... And this was before he created the creation. So, according to this alleged saying by Ali, you know, he was created...
You give the reference there, an introduction to...
Shiite Islam, page 148 to 149. He's saying that, you know, Muhammad was especially created, and Ali was especially created just after Muhammad. So kind of like, you know, kind of like existed before the world, existed before creation, you had Ali.
Mm-hmm. Well, that means he has a pretty high opinion of himself, it looks like.
If he actually said that, right?
That's right. And if... I would assume then, because there is this tradition here, that a lot of Shiites would believe this, just because they have such a high regard for Ali, and it seems to tie in a little bit with what they want to believe about him.
Right, and some Shiites don't actually worship Ali, but they kind of say, well, there's none closer to God, and he's as close, almost like as close to being God as you can get. So they kind of say, well, he's not actually God, but he's, you know, pretty close. You know, while others would just say, yes, he's actually God. And they'd also say, you know, Muhammad might be part of God. And there's actually a lot of, you know, heterogeneous kind of beliefs among different Shiite groups.
I see.
Okay. But talking about some of the Shiite beliefs, though, first in common, then we'll talk about some of the groups, is one difference they have from most Sunnis is they believe in temporary marriage. Now, temporary marriage... Sunnis and Shiites all agree was allowable in early Islam, but most Sunnis say that temporary marriage was abrogated and no longer valid. Temporary marriage is where a man and a girl, they get together and they say, we agree to be married for 1 month or 1 week. Or maybe maybe a trader's on a trip and going to be in a place for a couple months. So he marries a woman, and at the end of the month, and the marriage is just automatically gone. And it could be 1 day. And in Iran, it was once said, that the young men were cautioned, don't go out and spend the night with a prostitute or something. If you want to do that, at least have a temporary marriage. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's kind of a total, just kind of jettisoning or disemboweling of the institution of marriage.
Right, because it's simply getting around the issue. It's a way to circumvent the clear teaching, because we're coming from a Christian biblical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That violates what the Bible says clearly. God says in the Bible, "I hate divorce." And Jesus chastised men for their hardness of their hearts, that they needed a bill of divorcement and things of this nature. So the God of the Bible hates divorce, and Jesus himself chastised the scribes and the Pharisees for coming up with all kinds of rules and regulations and traditions to circumvent the rules of God, to get around what God says by coming up with all these other little man-made doctrines. Well, here's a doctrine that sounds exactly like the type that Jesus condemned in the Scripture, and but apparently it's widely accepted by the Shiites.
Yes, right. Now, but that's just one doctrine.
But of course, that doctrine would be by people that kind of like that. Hey, I can just have sex with this woman for a little while, and then I can change it up and go somewhere else. I mean, it just kind of, like you said, it just kind of gets rid of marriage, and it makes it just convenient for whatever you want to do in that situation. It's not like real marriage.
Right.
It's like whatever you want to make it.
Yeah. Now with Shiite, every marriage is not a temporary marriage. I'm sure the majority are not, actually. But the fact that this is allowed is kind of unusual. Okay. Another thing is that sometimes Shiites were persecuted by Sunnis. Shiites are pretty much agree that Muhammad is not the final prophet. Okay. Now they might disagree who's coming back. The vast majority say the 12th Imam, who's also named Muhammad, is coming back. So some Sunnis would call Shiites gulat, or like cult, because they deny that Muhammad is the final prophet. Well, strictly speaking, according to an introduction to Shiite Islam, page 67, there's nowhere in the Quran that actually says Muhammad is the final prophet. So if you're going to base on the Quran, you really couldn't say one way or the other. But because they have been persecuted by Sunnis, many Shiites have a doctrine called taqiyya, which is called dissimilitude. And that means it's okay to lie about what you believe in order for safety, to save your life. So if there's heavy persecution of Shiites and they ask a Shiite, are you a Shiite, it's okay for him to say no.
And they're basing that from what you have here on Surah 327.
Is an interpretation of 327, and some Sufi groups also believe in similitude. There's 1 or 2 Sufi groups that don't, and many Sunnis do not also.
And once again, that's a violation of what Jesus taught and the Bible teaches. The God of the Bible doesn't allow for something like this, because it's condemned in Scripture to say, let us do evil that good may come.
Yeah.
And Jesus said, when speak the truth, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay.
Right.
And I think of what Isaiah said in Isaiah 65:16, and he said it not just once but twice. That the God of truth, that's the God that we find in the Bible. But apparently, this God in Islam, which seems to have a lot of different characteristics than the God of the Bible, allows for temporary marriage, allows for lying and making up stuff and doing evil that good may come.
Yeah, and just to clarify, on the Christian view, it's not that you have to spill your guts and say everything to everybody, but if somebody asks you, are you a Christian, you'll stand up for Christ and say what you believe.
Well, Jesus
truthfully.
even said, if you don't stand up before men and acknowledge me, then I will deny you on the day. So you're supposed to stand up and speak for what you believe and stand up for the Lord and not be ashamed, basically.
Right.
So
now, it said in the Quran, it says that it doesn't say whether Muhammad's a final prophet or not. However, the Sunni Muslims kind of fix that by saying that there is no final prophet
after Muhammad.
According to the Bukhari Hadith, Volume 4, 732 to 735, and that's page 41 to 43. Okay.
Along these lines, the anti-Shiite Hadiths basically say Ali is not Muhammad's direct successor. Quote, the Prophet said, "But I should say, O my head, I feel like calling Abu Bakr and his son and appoint the former as my successor, lest people should say something or wish for something. Allah will insist on Abu Bakr becoming a caliph, and the believers will prevent anyone else from claiming the caliphate." And that's from Bukhari, Volume 9, 334, pages 246 through 247.
Now, we really haven't gotten to the heart and passion of Shiite Islam. The first imam was Ali. The second imam was his son, Hassan. And Hassan was killed about 669 after rebelling. And the third imam is arguably just as important as Ali, and he was Ali's another son of Ali named Hussein. And anyway, Hussein was at first peaceful, and though he might not have agreed with it, he was peaceful about the fact of all these caliphs that kind of left him around. But anyway, later a revolt was started near Kufa, which is kind of like the center of Shiite activity. And Hussein and a very small band of soldiers and their families was with him, and they were traveling to like meet up with others. And they were surrounded by a Sunni force. And in 61 years after the Hijra, or 680 AD, at Karbala, they were all killed. They were asked if they were willing to surrender, and they weren't willing to surrender. And so, according to Shiite versions of it, Hussein was killed while going to fetch water for the thirsty children, because the Sunni army stood between the river and Hussein, so they couldn't get any water for a couple of days. All right, and then Hussein was beheaded, and his head was brought to Damascus as a trophy. Now, Sunnis today agree that this was a pretty poor way to treat a descendant of the Prophet, and the Shiites have made a big deal out of this. They have you have Christian passion plays about Christ, like at Ober Ammergau in Germany and things like that. Well, you have Muslim passion plays about Hussein, and you even have in Shiite Muslim tradition stories about Abraham, going to Karbala and his horse stumbling and he being told prophetically that this is where Hussein would be killed, and kind of sacrificially, for the sins of the world. And then you have other people coming and hearing about this. And in Africa, there's a poem in the Swahili language about the passion of Hussein, and it's 4,000 lines long. This is according to textual sources or a study of Islam. And so looking at that, it's a real big deal with passion, and with Hussein and also with Ali. You have the 10th of Muharram. Muharram is the first month in the Islamic calendar, and it was on the 10th of the month that they say that, the first 10 days are a big festival, and it's sort of a festival commemorating a sad event, the martyrdom. And like on the 11th day, many Shiites, they will stay in bed with a bandage on their head. And it's not that they were physically hurt, but it's like commemorating, Hussein, dying, and as a sacrifice, being killed by these other Muslims. Okay, and you have many Muslims who are flagellants, and what they would do is they would have chains or whips, and they would like hit their back with it. And seeing pictures of it, you would just see kind of like little rivulets of blood streaming down their back. And they do other things too. Less commonly, like have needles in their hands, and they would scourge their chest, and they would do all of this. And one, I guess, metaphor of this is to say, well, if we had been there in Hussein's time, we would have stood with Hussein and died with him. And I've even read that some Sunnis, almost like in sympathy, they kind of like celebrate this festival, for this great wrong done to Hussein also, though they, of course, don't go the whole way that the Shiites do. Now, the curious thing about the flagellation is that the official Shiite kind of clerics, the mullahs and stuff, they have written fatwas, which are official Islamic judgments, saying that flagellation is wrong and don't do it. So many of the top Shiite leaders say don't do the flagellation, but many Shiites do it anyway. kind of like just they're so caught up in the passion of what was wrongly done to Hussein by fellow Muslims.
Right, right. So, just another tradition, but there is some conflict there as to whether you do it or not do it.
Right.
Apparently, some Shiites don't listen to their leaders and just do flagellation anyway.
Right.
So, is that a common trait among Shiites? Are they more free spirited, more liberal when it comes to their leaders? Sunnis, does it just come down to modernist views and whatever?
No. It's not really more liberal, because in some Shiite sects, especially some Ismaili sects, it's like if you disobey your imam, it's like disobeying God.
Okay.
All right. But so there's a lot of variation among Shiites with what they do, and there's been a lot of fighting, which we'll get into a little bit, among Shiites themselves.
Okay, so they're more or less like what they accuse the Christians of being, that there's just different branches and groups of Christians, and some take it more seriously and some take it less seriously.
Yeah, lots of fighting between them. The important, if you ask what's the difference in doctrine between some of these groups, it's like, well, you don't see a lot except for the successor. Says, well, maybe one successor versus another successor. Maybe neither of them really said a whole lot. And so centuries later, an American might think, well, what difference does it make? Mm-hmm. Well, it's apparently a very key, critical difference, in their minds.
I got you.
But talking about some of the successors, the first three were Ali, bin Abi Talib, Hassan, his son Hassan, and Ali's other son Hussein were the first three. And then there's Ali Zainu al-Abidin. Now, warning, many of these names are either Ali or Muhammad, so that's why they have a surname or a nickname after them to kind of differentiate them. Then there's Muhammad al-Bakr. For most Shiites, there's a small group of Shiites, and today there's some in Yemen, who say, no, he wasn't the fifth imam. The fifth imam was really Zayd, Z-A-Y-D, and then the sixth was his son Yahya. And Yahya is like the Mideastern form of John, by the way. All right, and the sixth one for all Shiites, except for the Zaydites, is Jafar al-Sadiq, who wrote a lot of, he did say a lot and had a lot of traditions that Shiites respect. Okay, now the seventh one, there's a big controversy over. Okay, the vast majority of Shiites are nicknamed Twelvers. Their actual name is Ithna Ashariya. And they say that Ismail was the oldest son, and he would have been the imam, but he was a heavy drinker, and so he was rejected. And so Jafar chose Musa al-Kazim as the imam instead, and so the imams after that descended from him. Okay, Ismailis, and they're called that because they follow Ismail, say, no, that's not true. What proof do you have that Ismail was a drinker? And an Ismaili friend told me, there might have been a conspiracy on the part of Musa or somebody else, but they think that Ismail got a bum rap, and that it should have been Ismail. So there's a agree with that. But the vast majority, and especially in Iran, are the 12er Shiites. And the Ismailis, they're nicknamed Seveners, because the seventh place is where they split off. Okay. Well, now after Ismail died, after Ismail's rule was done, we'll phrase it that way, then what happened? Well, some Ismailis say, well, he disappeared. He didn't die. Like God took him and concealed him, and he will return someday in the future. Okay. Others say, no, he died. And the eighth imam was Muhammad. Others say, no, he died, and the eighth imam was Abdallah. And another say, no, maybe there shouldn't be an imam after that.
So they're confused as to which one they should have as their eighth.
And then after the eighth, then there are many different groups after that too.
Okay.
Now on the 12er side, from 8 to 12, it's more or less consistent among them. And the 12th one is especially important, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya. Al-Hanafiya was because they say that he was born of like a Hanafi woman, almost like a concubine or something, from the 11th one. And he didn't die, according to the 12ers. He disappeared about 875 AD, and he will return as the Mahdi. Okay, so you got all of these different, groups, and they all kind of split. And when talking about some of the groups, there's lots of different sects, but there's one way to kind of make sense of the 12er sects. Not 12er, the Shiite sects, they disagree with each other for three primary things. One, what's called Gulat kind of theology, where they believe in worshiping a man in addition to Allah, Many times it's Ali. Sometimes it's somebody else. Sometimes it's Muhammad. Sometimes it's worshiping Ishmael. Sometimes it's worshiping one of these other guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A second group reason for these sects is they disagree on the successors, like we talked about. Okay. And then a third reason is that many of these sects are waqifa, and waqifa means hesitators. And hesitators are people who deny that a particular individual died, but that God took him and that God will bring him back, later. And so you have all of these hesitators, and there's a chart showing some of the hesitator groups, which is kind of, and this isn't all of them. This is just a few of them. Well, the Saba'iya were hesitators of Ali. Ali never died, and that he's coming back. There's Ulayaniya, and some of these have synonyms. I'll just say the first one. They go beyond the Saba'iya and they say Ali is divine. Then you have the Muhammadiyya, who say Muhammad is divine too. Then you have the Ishaqiyya. They're another group of that. And then you have the Rizamiyya, which says that they kind of take hesitation to its logical extreme. They say, well, every prophet existed. I mean, God existed in every prophet, so they're kind of ultra gulat almost. Okay, and then some Ismailis, not all, but some have kind of semi-divine status to Ismail. Okay, and then you think about the 12ers in general; they're all hesitators as far as the 12th Imam. But then you think of all Muslims they're all hesitators because they all deny that Jesus died on the cross. What Muslims typically say happened is that God miraculously and secretly substituted Judas, made Judas look like Jesus, and switched their bodies, or I don't know what body Jesus had, but had Judas' body look like Jesus. So everyone thought they're crucifying Jesus and really crucifying Judas, and Jesus escaped, and either he ascended to heaven, or the Ahmadiyyas say he actually escaped and went to India and died. And so with no evidence whatsoever, they say that God secretly and fooled all the disciples and fooled everybody else and caused Jesus not to die. Because they always feel like, well, Jesus being a prophet just couldn't die like that. Well, many Shiites say, well, a particular imam just couldn't die like that, and so God must have done something else. To me, the logic looks identical.
Yeah, and it just sort of makes God look like a liar, from my opinion. It just... if Jesus wasn't the one that they grabbed, it's because God took another man and made him look like Jesus, so they grabbed the wrong man and crucified him. It seems like God willfully deceived people in this affair, and of course, from a Christian perspective in the Bible, that whole story would be calling the Bible a lie, because the Bible says it was Jesus. Jesus himself prophesied that he would be dying for the sins of man, and all the disciples and everybody testified to this fact. So this very story you just mentioned flies in the face on two fronts. One, it's basically saying the Bible's no good, and the stories there are no good and are a lie. And on the other hand, it's making God to look like a liar, because he takes one man and makes him look like another and deceives all these people so that they'll kill the wrong man.
Right. But now, and of course we say that based on the Bible. Now, from a Sunni Muslim perspective, when they say that Muhammad's divine, despite what the Quran clearly says, when they say Muhammad, if one group says Muhammad never died, other groups say Ali never died, it's like, well, that kind of makes the Sunni tradition all a liar too. So it's
exactly.
It's like, just at what level do you want to take it?
That's true. And then when people just look at the logic of the situation, when you've got people saying these things and claiming these things, like you just mentioned, well, then they're automatically, logically saying, well, the Quran's not true because of this, that, and the other, and they're saying the Bible over here is not true and Jesus is not true. Next thing you know, they're just kind of making up just something totally new and accepting it as the truth.
With no evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, now, has the Mahdi ever returned? Well, if you listen to some sources, he's returned. In fact, lots of people say he's returned different ways. Now, there are lots of people who have arisen and claim to be the 12th Imam returned, or claim to be somebody else returned. One example is Imam al-Hussein bin al-Qasim al-Ilyani, way back in 1013 A.D. There was the Mahdist movement in the Sudan, where they rebelled against the Egyptians and the British. There was an Ahmadiyya in Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in 1879. He claimed that he was the Mahdi, and also some of these groups, they would claim that they were also the Christ returned at the same time. There's Sulaiman Murshad of Syria. He was an Alawite, which we'll talk about in another show, but he claimed to be the Mahdi. The Baha'u'llah from the Baha'is in 1863, they claimed to be the Mahdi. And then there's Lord Hakim, didn't claim to come back, but he's worshipped as a visible God by the Druze. So there's all of these people, and then sometimes there's maybe a person himself would not claim to be he was a Mahdi, but then he died, and then his followers would claim he was a Mahdi. So you have all, in Christianity sometimes you have these false prophets, these kind of lesser antichrists that claim to be Christ's returned. Mm-hmm. Well, in Islam you have all these guys floating around, claiming to be the Mahdi, at least till they get killed.
Right. But if, there's a definite power play going on there. By claiming to be the Mahdi, you're
right.
basically trying to get a power play because of the religious beliefs of the population around you.
Right. Now, most people who claim to be the Mahdi or similar are from the Twelver sect of Shiites. However, the Zaydites, they have the Husainiyya sect. They kind of said that they were the Mahdi, and there can be some kind of ebb and flow between Twelvers and Zayites and Seveners. And one thing that was kind of very shocking to me is when you're a Christian, and have you ever read the book of Revelation and ever asked the question, when all of these cataclysmic events occur, how are non-Christians going to explain all this? How are non-Christians going to look at this and still not believe in God? And I think one answer, maybe part of the answer, is they'll have an alternate explanation. In fact, that alternate explanation is already here. Okay, within Twelver Shiite Islam, here are some of the teachings they have about the end times. Okay, what they say is first will come the Red Death, which means the sword, and the White Death, which is the plague. Well, in Revelation it talks about the four horsemen. The white, which is conquest, the red, which is war and bloodshed, and then you have the black for the famine, and then you have the dappled horse for the plague. So it's like, well, they kind of got 2 out of 4 there. And then it says that the Mahdi will be descended from Fatima, which is Fatima married Ali, so descended from Ali too. And the Mahdi will be named Muhammad. Okay, and then it says the Mahdi will raise the black standard, kind of like battle flag in Khorasan. And it says he'll be a young man with medium height and very handsome with black hair. It says he will not come on an odd-numbered year. I guess that means he'll come on an even-numbered. He will go to Mecca, and then he'll travel to Kufa. And there'll be this other individual called the Dajjal, and Sunni Islam has this concept too, who's has kind of one eye that can't see out of and looks really ugly, and it's sort of analogous to an antichrist. Mm-hmm. And he'll come from the east, and it says the sun will rise in the west, and the star in the east will give out as much light as the moon, and then there'll be a caller from heaven. Remember, there's the angel calling from heaven in Revelation, and there'll be a great conflict in Syria until it's destroyed. The Bible talks about a great conflict at Jerusalem. And it says, like Muhammad, and this is where it gets, really interesting, the Mahdi will have a new cause and a new book and a new religious law. I said, well, what about Muslims then? And the next part, this will be a severe test for Arabs. And the sword will be between the Mahdi and the Arabs. Doesn't sound like an Arab made up all this stuff, does it? Kind of some animosity toward Arabs there. So there'll be a new religious text that will be it. Now, who knows? There could be some truth with this, and the Mahdi may actually be, the Antichrist may claim to be the Mahdi. Mm-hmm. So we can kind of see this. And also another thing is the 313 people who fought at the Battle of Badr, they will also return when the Mahdi returns and fight with them. Well,
I thought it was interesting. Jesus will also return with those guys, so he's going to have some other people coming back with him.
Right. Now Sunnis also say, from the Hadiths and from the Quran, that Jesus will return. So Shiites, they kind of have to say it. So what they did, seems like they took some basic stuff, which there wasn't a whole lot in the Quran about the end times, and then they had the Sunni Hadiths have stuff in the end times too, and then they took a lot of stuff from the Bible, and they kind of made their own thing and put them all together, and so when these things happen, then they'll kind of know, what's going to be.
Well, it looks like not just the Mahdi will return and these 300 guys from this battle,
313,
and Jesus, but also other prophets, and we know in Islamic teaching there's like 124,000 prophets.
I'm not sure if that's Islamic teaching or if that's Sunni Islamic teaching, but at least all the prophets will return.
Yeah, I know that's Sunni teaching. I'm not sure about Shiite. That's where you come in.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they and the imams, can't forget them. They will all return too. Okay. All right. So this is some of the various. Not all Shiites hold to this. This is primarily a Twelver Shiite. Okay, just some of their teaching on the end times, and I'm sure there are disagreements among themselves on some of it. But it's like being a Christian was kind of amazing to read this and says, boy, they try to counterfeit everything they can. From my perspective. All right. So, so the other view of Shiites that we haven't talked about too much is a much smaller group called the Ismaili, and it's Ismaili. It's not Smiley or anything like that. And they're nicknamed Seveners because they split with the seventh one. Okay, now the Ismailis, there are many different groups of Ismailis, and some of them would think, well, they were the only group. And some of those groups have a real problem because, like other Shiites, it's important to have a living imam to interpret the Quran. It's like you almost don't have true religion without it. Well, what if you're in a Ismaili group and your imam has passed away and with no descendants? Then it's like, well, if that's the most important thing, so some of those, I'm sure there are less Ismaili groups today than there were before. Okay.
So they got real trouble there if somebody dies.
Right. Without any heir.
Yeah, and they need to pick up another imam somewhere.
Yeah. Because usually say the imams, they have to be from father to son. The only exception was Hussein was actually the brother of Hassan, and not the son of Hassan. So I'll give you kind of a smattering of some Ismaili teachings that are believed by some, but not necessarily all Ismaili groups. And some of these are strange, and some of these have actually some similarity, it seems like, to Alawite teaching. Okay, which we'll talk about in another show. But there's a triad of fortune, allegorical interpretation, and thought image. And Muhammad received the fortune of his birth. He was one who'd get the Quran, being the revelator of the Quran. But Ali provides the interpretation, okay? And then the Imam provides the thought image. And Fazlur Rahman in Islam, page 176, mentions that some have thought that some of these concepts may have been borrowed from Neoplatonism and the Zoroastrian concept of fortune, okay? With some of the Ismailis, it's also a little similar to Alawites in that but not identical. They say there's 7 cycles of history with 7 speakers. And these speakers were Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. And they had 7 mutes accompanying them.
What's a mute?
I guess a non-speaker who's like their assistant or helper, with them.
Oh, okay.
And so it's just kind of interesting to see what they have there. Some of the Ismaili sects is that the assassins. They took hashish and assassinated people and were very bloodthirsty. The Alawites are actually not an Ismaili sect. They tried to, and they and the Ismailis fought each other. They tried to come together at one time, but they did not have any kind of merging. And then you have the Druze, which came from the Ismailis, but they are really, Muslims consider them outside of Islam today. They're the Fatimites. They're the Jafari we talked about, was sort of a compromise with Sunni Islam. And then there are the Mustalis, which are kind of a main group. Their headquarters is in Bombay, India. And 2 groups came off of them, the Sulaimani and the Dawoodi. Then there's the Nizais, and the Nizais, one group that kind of came off of them are called Aga Khanis that follow the Aga Khan. And the Aga Khan sounds like an interesting guy. He was educated, the current Aga Khan that is, he was educated at Harvard, and he believes in kind of marrying the best of the West and Islam. And he, builds, has hospitals and stuff for the poor, and they are not warlike, and it's like, kind of like, almost similar to like the modern or liberal Muslims we talked about before, but yet he's also a descendant of the Imams, at least according to the Aga Khani sect. And then kind of in direct opposite of that, you have the Karmatians, who were sort of brutal and almost like communistic in having their goods and stuff in common, and they were terrorists around 890 AD. So you have Karmatians on one extreme, maybe you have Aga Khanis on another extreme, and lots of other things in the middle. So it's a very kind of heterogeneous group. Okay, but one thing that I think all Shiites kind of have in common is they believe that the Quran is not enough. Okay, they do believe in Muhammad and the Quran, but you have to have an interpreter of it. You have to have an imam, alive to interpret the Quran, or somebody.
All right, Steve, that sounds like Roman Catholicism. That sounds like you have to have, the Quran's. Well, in Roman Catholicism, the Bible's not enough.
Right. And
you got to have an authoritative magisterium and a pope to infallibly interpret the Bible for you, and you have to follow their rules and regulations and their interpretation. And this just sounds like an Islamic variation of the same thing.
Yeah, it's not identical, but it sounds pretty similar. And it's like, I guess our view is the Bible is enough and Jesus is enough, and you don't need all the Roman Catholic stuff, but then you don't need all the Muslim stuff either.
Right. So I guess if I were a devout Muslim, let's say, I would sit there and go, why do I need this guy over here to tell me how to, because they all disagree with each other. And as you mentioned, all those different groups that I'm sure a lot of Muslims are aware of. Why do I need all these confused groups to try to interpret the Quran for me? Why can't I just do it myself? If Allah is concerned about us and wants us to know the truth, well, here's His word. I might as well just go with that. Why do I need these guys?
Right.
You know? And but apparently there's, just like in Roman Catholicism, with over 1 billion Catholics, there's always people that don't want to take the time to really study the Bible or anything. It's a lot easier to shuffle that stuff off to somebody else's responsibility.
They'll do the thinking for you.
Yeah, I don't want to think about this. I just want to do my life. You know, go bowling on Tuesday night. You know, go drinking out with the boys on Friday night, and I'll let these guys worry about the religious aspects. I'll give it lip service, but I'll let them do the thinking for me. And so that's kind of a trait that seems to tie into this, not just in
kind of common with all
kinds of religions.
Yeah,
common with all religions. And I'm just asking the question: does that, just because you have that attitude, does that really make your religion right, or even your position personally before God right?
Yeah.
When you're standing before Allah, or if you're a Muslim and you're standing before God Almighty, according to Christian, is God going to accept that you that, well, you just put your mind on hold, and so you're going to let these guys do it for you? How do you know those guys are right?
Right.
But you've got the Word here before you. If you really believe the Quran's the Word of God, or if you really believe the Bible's the Word of God, why do you have to bother with these guys who may be right or wrong? Why not just go with what the Word of God says to you? But I think that's a main problem on why there's so many offshoots and so many religions, not just Islam or any Shi'ite sects, but you get in Christianity and other religions.
You get Sunnis, you get Hindus.
It's so much easier to just put your mind on the shelf, let somebody else do your thinking for you, and then you can go about your business, and you don't have to worry about all that because, hey, they'll take care of it for me.
Right.
But that's not how it works.
Yeah.
In either by the Quran or by the Bible. But anyway, go ahead.
So with the stuff that they add, well, what kinds of stuff do they add? Is it just sort of innocuous stuff? Well, let me read a quote to you and you can kind of decide for yourself. Islam makes it incumbent on all adult males, provided they're not disabled and incapacitated, to prepare themselves for the conquest of other, that is, countries, so that the writ of Islam is obeyed in every country of the world. But those who study Islamic holy war will understand why Islam wants to conquer the whole world. ... Those who know nothing of Islam pretend that Islam counsels against war. Those, that is, who say this, are witless. Islam says, kill all the unbelievers, just as they would kill you all. Notice the siege mentality here.
That's right.
Okay. Does this mean that Muslims should sit back until they're devoured by the unbelievers? Islam says, kill then, as non-Muslims, put them to the sword and scatter their armies. Does this mean sitting back until, that is, non-Muslims overcome us? Islam says, kill in the service of Allah those who may want to kill you. Does this mean we should surrender to the enemy? Islam says whatever good there is exists thanks to the sword and in the shadow of the sword. People cannot be made obedient except with the sword. The sword is the key to paradise, which can be opened only for holy warriors. These are hundreds of other Quranic psalms and hadiths.
These are, right?
Yeah. Urging Muslims to value war and to fight. Does that mean that Islam is a religion that prevents men from waging war? I spit upon those foolish souls who make such a claim. And this is originally quoted from Amir Tahiri in Holy Terror in London, 1987, page 226, 227. And the actual wording of this quote is from Why I'm Not a Muslim by Ibn Waraq, page 11 and 12. So this is a quote from Khomeini's, from
Ayatollah
Khomeini's in Iran.
And once again, to reiterate, with time running out, what is his position of power to make a statement like that?
He was the modern supreme religious leader in Iran at that time.
Okay, so he makes that statement, and there's a lot of people that will take that very seriously, what he said about spitting on people, killing people.
Right. Well, he actually spit on the idea that is not waging war. Now, today in Iran, it's a different situation. You have moderate people, moderate Shiites, who have turned away from that, and you still have plenty of fundamentalist Shiites. And there's sort of maybe a power struggle going on between them. But just one other thing about jihad. The Dictionary of Islam defines jihad as a religious war with those who are unbelievers in the mission of Muhammad. It is an incumbent religious duty established in the Quran and the tradition as a divine institution, enjoined especially for the purpose of advancing Islam and of repelling evil from Muslims. Okay, and that's also a quote that was by Ibn Waraq. So you can kind of see that's kind of where Shiite Islam, where a lot of it stands. And so to get back to the start of the show, Karbala is everywhere. Every month is Muharram. Every day is Ashura. So we're saying the battlefield of Karbala is the entire world, metaphorically. And that every month is the first month, and every day is the day that Hussein died. And so every time that Muslims should be prepared to fight with Hussein. Okay, and so that's sort of what they're saying with that. And with all the flagellation and everything else, I guess I have some kind of thoughts on that. Okay, first of all, Jesus rebuked the very religious Pharisees, saying, "You have no room for my word." And we can be so busy, whether it's doing foolish things or getting wealth, or we're so busy wanting to kill people, or so busy in religion, that we have no time for God, and we don't have room for Jesus' word. Okay, Shiites, one thing you can say about them is many Shiites have a lot of passion. And that's kind of exciting. But passion for killing and passion for hatred is no substitute for passion for the love of God. And if you're a Shiite who flagellates your back and does all these things, let me tell you, you haven't oozed enough blood yet. Okay, no matter how much blood you ooze that's stained with sin, that's not going to be enough. You have to have the pure blood of Jesus to cleanse you from your sins. And there's no other blood that will work. There's no other sacrifice, either real or imagined sacrifice, that was sufficient. It's only Jesus' sacrifice that would really save you from your sins. And so when there's no way to merit heaven, Jesus merited for it by being the ransom for us. But God's forgiveness is not automatic. You have to accept the Lord Jesus as your Savior. And you have to follow Him. And you have to make every day Christmas. Not the 10th of, not Ashura, but every day Christmas as you want to follow God and seek to love Him. And so that's the message that I've tried to understand Shiite Islam, and I hope that you would turn around and try to understand God's Word in the Bible.
Well, that was very well said, Steve. We're running rapidly out of time. I would like to remind our viewers that our ministry, Christian Answers, has a newsletter available. Anyone that wants to call or write our ministry can get a free subscription of that. We also have a website on Islam. Would you like to mention it?
www.muslimhope.com.
And also another website also dealing with different biblical issues. We have tracts and other free literature available on Islam. These covered a Bukhari Hadith here.
We have more Shiite stuff too.
Oh, that's right. We have all kinds of material, not only on Islam, but on other religions, other topics, and so forth. But just give us a call or write. The address and phone numbers will be at the end of the program. We do this out of love. We do this because God tells us to believe in truth. Jesus said He was the way, the truth, and the life. And He was here 600 years before Muhammad. So believe what He said. Don't just take someone else's word for it. Check into these things yourself. Jesus said He was the Lord of life, and that you have no life in yourselves. You have to put your trust in Him. And that's what we urge you to do. Don't put your trust and put your mind on a shelf like so many people do. But with that said, we have to go. Join us again next time. I'm Larry Wessels with Steve Morrison for Christian Answers. Thank you for being with us. God bless you all.